Elena Davis had walked the sterile white corridors of St. Mary's Hospital for 15 years, but that evening, her footsteps echoed differently. It was her last shift, not because she chose it, but because budget cuts had stripped her of the job she loved and dedicated her life to. Carrying her worn tote bag with a stethoscope peeking out from the side pocket, she felt hollow, as if part of her identity had been peeled away. The automatic doors hissed open, releasing her into the cool night air, where she paused to gather her thoughts before heading toward the dimly lit parking lot. Just as she reached her car, movement caught her eye, a man in a dark suit stumbling near the hospital's main entrance. Within seconds, he collapsed to the ground. Elena didn't think, she simply acted. Her training, her instinct, and her compassion surged to the forefront as she sprinted toward him, her bag forgotten on the pavement. Kneeling beside him, she checked his pulse, weak, irregular. His breathing was shallow, his lips turning blue. Though she was no longer on duty, in her heart, she was still a nurse, and she knew every second counted. She tilted his head back, cleared his airway, and began chest compressions, counting steadily, refusing to let panic creep in. Sweat dotted her forehead as she breathed life into his lungs, her own heart racing against the silence of the night. Minutes dragged on like hours until she heard the blare of sirens and saw paramedics rushing toward her. They quickly took over, hooking the man to oxygen and lifting him onto a stretcher, but not before one of them looked at her with a nod of acknowledgement, an unspoken recognition of her role in keeping him alive. Elena stood back, chest heaving, watching as they wheeled him inside. For a fleeting moment, relief washed over her, followed by an unexpected sadness. She had saved a man's life, yet she had no hospital to return to, no patients awaiting her care. As she picked up her tote bag and sank into the driver's seat of her aging car, she stared at her trembling hands and whispered to herself, "At least he's alive." The streets were empty as she drove home, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her shoulders, but deep within, she carried the quiet knowledge that even stripped of her job, she had not lost her calling. The next morning, Elena was stirred from restless sleep by the low, steady hum of engines outside her small, weathered home. At first, she thought it was a neighbor leaving early for work, but as the sound persisted, she reluctantly rose and pulled back the curtain. What she saw left her frozen in disbelief. Parked neatly along her curb were 4 gleaming luxury cars, their polished exteriors catching the golden rays of sunrise. She blinked, certain her weary eyes were deceiving her, but the sight remained. A knock echoed at her door, firm yet respectful, and with cautious steps, she opened it to find a tall man in a tailored navy suit, flanked by 3 others who looked equally distinguished. Her breath caught as recognition struck. The man standing before her was the one she had saved only hours before. His face, though pale, now bore the flush of life, and his eyes carried warmth instead of the emptiness she had seen on the pavement. "Nurse Davis," he greeted softly, his voice steady but touched with emotion, "you don't know me, but I am Charles Whitmore. Yesterday, you gave me back something I can never repay, my life." Elena tried to wave off his gratitude, insisting that she had only done what anyone would, but Charles shook his head firmly. "No," he replied, "many would have walked away. You didn't. And I will not forget it." At his signal, one of the men behind him stepped forward, carrying a slim leather case and a small box. Another held out a folder thick with documents. Before Elena could even process what was happening, Charles explained that he wanted to ensure she never had to worry about losing her livelihood again. Inside the case was a generous check that could erase her debts and secure her future. The folder contained an offer of a new position in one of his privately funded medical centers, where her compassion and skill would be treasured, not discarded. And from the small velvet box, he revealed a set of keys to one of the very cars parked outside, a gift of gratitude. Tears welled in Elena's eyes, her voice trembling as she whispered that she had only done her duty as a nurse. But Charles gently smiled and said, "You did far more than that. You reminded me that humanity still exists." For the first time in months, Elena felt the heavy shadow of uncertainty lift. The cars outside gleamed like beacons of change, but the true gift was the reminder that kindness, even when unnoticed, had the power to change lives, including her own.